Here we are. So I'm Kennedy. So I want to welcome you to our first creative process roundtable. Tonight we're going to tackle that subject of inspiration. What is it? How do we use it in our process? Do we use it? And hopefully we can inspire some people that are here today to continue, developing their process, and then also not being afraid of using that eraser whenever inspiration is like, you know what, see ya. We've all definitely been there, so hopefully we can share some experiences with everyone. So I'm going to try to monitor the chat as well. I'm going to start off with asking some questions after we introduce our special guest here tonight. I just wanted to mention that Andrew is here. Andrew's been hanging out with me for a hot second here. We met in Hesperia when I was teaching in Hesperia. And so he's the one that's been reaching out to you and helping me get this thing organized. Andrew, you want to wave and say hello to everyone,
Yeah.
please? Right on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. Nice to greet you all.
Excellent. Right on. And so tonight, for our panel of guests, we have with us Hummie Mann, amazing composer, orchestrator, conductor. We met when I was working for Christopher Young back in the day on Drag Me to Hell. And then we also have Jim Dooley. Also, I met when I was working at Chris. I think I actually called you a couple of times for some assistant panels to come in. And I just wanted to say, I think I mentioned to you, I'm a huge fan of your score for Pushing Daisies. Still watch that all the time, so thank you for that. And then we have Todd Barton, one of my great kindred composers. We follow each other on Instagram, and we've just been encouraging and inspiring each other for how many years? Like at least 3 or 4, right? Yeah, so it's been absolutely great. And then we have Kristen Baum. We met also when I was working at Christopher Young's office. We worked on Untraceable, a couple other movies together, and we've just been keeping in touch for the last few years, and it's been great. So it's great to see you. Loved your piece that you presented on the Burnside session. So if you want to mention that or talk about that, that'd be great to hear about that process. And then Assaf, my dear friend
Hello.
Assaf, we met at USC in '06 and decided to conquer the world.
Yeah,
So here we are. All right, so
we
shall we
are.
get started here? We've got some other people hanging out with us here tonight. I see Tracy. I see Eva. Eva. Okay, so Eva is the founder of the Lou Harrison House for Music, Arts, and Ecology, and invited me to come and do a residency there. And I was there from October through December, and it just was such an amazing time, and I'm so grateful. And we've decided to do some projects together that we'll discuss at a later date. But I'm just so grateful, and it's so great to see you. So welcome. All right, so let's get started, yo. First thing, what is inspiration? What is this thing, right? Anybody want to go first? For me, we always talk about it like being this spark, right? This thing that just gets this idea going. But I've also heard Elliot Goldenthal say it's like a thief. It'll cut you in the night, I've also, read Lou Harrison talk about, inspiration being that situation where you can't be afraid to use the eraser the next day, and he mentioned it being kind of like God resting on the seventh day. He had to rest to take a look and see what what exactly happened, right, to see if it was actually good. So what is inspiration? And anybody wants to start?
Okay.
Hi.
I'll
Yes, right
jump.
on.
I'll bite. Um, for me, it's sort of achieving critical mass. Along the way, you put something down and then you start following it, and it develops, and then you throw it away, and then something else develops, and you erase a little, and then eventually, none of it is wasted energy.
Right.
Uh, but eventually, critical mass happens for me, anyway, and it all just it comes together. and then you have to start all over again.
Excellent. This is true. Okay, right on. Excellent.
I think that it really depends on the type of project you're working on. I think the inspiration for working on a film or a TV show or a visual medium is obviously the actual source material. So I think that that's different, and they're both discovery. Somebody once kind of described like um, sculpture as a subtractive art form, where you start with a rock and you chop away a whole bunch of stuff, and then you've got what's left, and that's the
Right.
sculpture. And I think that writing music, whether it be for film, television, concert, or whatever, there's too many choices, and you have to start by cutting away what choices you're not going to use. You know, am I writing for an orchestra? Am I writing for a jazz ensemble? Am I writing for a rock rhythm section with some brass players? So there's all kinds of decisions that need to be made, and I think that that's kind of like the beginning, the first step of kind of leading you towards your inspiration. I don't know that it's the inspiration in and of itself, but certainly, when I watch a film that I'm going to score, I try to figure out what would be the right music to represent the director's vision in in a musical in musical language, and also what kinds of support the story is going to need throughout the film. Is it going to be, do I have to support more of the action stuff or more of the emotional stuff, or is it a combination of both? Are there elements of the story that are not being told very well that music can help with? And those are all, I always enjoy those kinds of challenges when a director says to me, that I really want the audience to be crying at this point, and this actor or this actress didn't really pull it off. I need you to really help evoke the emotion that's not coming across on the screen yet. So those kinds of challenges are always, I find those very inspirational.
I'll tell you, I think for me, I know that we're talking about inspiration, but I think when you're creating, I'd like to tie this into how you can best give your brain a chance to solve a problem. And I know for me that I'll give you two examples. One is me and one is going to be my wife. We're two different composers, but we look at these and look at things very differently. One practice that I've done to help my mind solve a problem, help give it time for myself, is that the last thing I do at the end of the day is look at the first thing that I'm going to be writing the next day. So this allows me to ruminate on it, maybe subconsciously, consciously. And then in the morning, it's like you're having your breakfast. Okay, you're just thinking about this while you've slept. Your mind has had time to chew on this problem, or this idea of this approach. How are you going to do this? And then by the time like you're taking a shower, you get dressed, have your coffee. By the time I've sat down to start a cue, I'm not cold, or I've given myself at least an opportunity to think of it technically, or maybe not waiting for inspiration to come, but allowing my collective experience as a composer to kind of like, oh wait, here's something you could do, but to give myself time to get to that. I think that's an important step for me. And like for someone like my wife, who's a composer, she benefits from, she has to be enthusiastic about something to do something well. So that means she's always moving from different project to different project all the time. Whatever she's in the mood for that day, that's. So I think what my long answer to this short question, which is, I think you have to find out what it's very specific to who you are, and also I think you benefit from giving yourself time to do it without having to do it as a reflex, which also that can be good at times, but you can also give your brain a chance to chew on some of these problems to come up with a better solution.
It's an interesting thing what you were saying, Jim, because I have a slightly different process, which is when I'm working on a project, I get up the next morning and kind of play through everything that I've written, so I have the kind of the momentum of the score, and so the next piece I'm writing, because some people like to do all the big chase cues first, and I like to go from the beginning of the film to the end of the film if I can, and then kind of get the momentum back up and continue on the continuum of the story. So it's kind of a slight variation on what you were talking about.
So for me, I guess I would talk about inspiration as sort of a way all the way back to the yogic idea of breath being inspiration, and that being the kind of taking in. And so when I think of creativity, and inspiration, a lot of it is taking in a lot of different things that can serve to inspire me. So I'm very visual, and so I like to enjoy art, and I love music, and so I'm taking in or inspiring a lot of different things that will then inform my creative practice or what I will be creating on any given day. So inspiration for me can have its outlet in a lot of different areas, like a little bit like Jim, you said your wife has to be enthusiastic about something. I do uh, music for film, and I do art songs, and I write poetry, and I write stories. And so I'm always like taking in a great mass of things and letting them kind of compost and allowing sort of a mystery kind of to happen when I have the luxury of doing that. When I'm working on a film score and it has to be done in a couple of weeks, then it is going to the toolbox and grabbing a hammer when I think a hammer will work, or a screwdriver if I think a screwdriver will work, and just applying tools within parameters that I've narrowed down that I know will work for a score, and kind of like forcing the process when I need to force the process. But then inspiration can also hit at 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm thinking about this theme and I'm trying to sleep. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, there's that theme, and I'll get up, I'll scribble it down and go back and sleep until I have to get up and really get to work on it. And then comes the process that Todd is talking about, which is the whittling away and the erasing and the going forward and backwards. So
I think I want to comment on what Kristen said. There's this moment of right before you fall asleep, where your brain basically let the guard down completely, and then you're open to get whatever received from the universe or whatever, something. And I would say inspiration is somewhere between brainwaves and the universe, and somewhere in between there's a connection that if we are out of the way, we let the guard down, we can expose ourselves to it. And I would say there are three, probably more, but there are three main processes of inspiration. One is, I call it the involuntary inspiration. You're in the shower, you're not working on anything, or you're stuck in traffic, or you're cooking. It doesn't matter. And all of a sudden it hits you, and you don't know where it came from, and you have no idea what it is. But here you are, running to the computer or to the piano or to the piece of paper and trying to take it down. And it's like you're not involved in generating that moment of inspiration. Then there is the second kind, which is kind of a 50-50 matching investment. I put $1, you put $1, where you 50% participate in the process, and the universe 50% participate in the process, where you want to be inspired, you want to get yourself inspired, and you put yourself in a position to be inspired. So, for example, Kennedy would go to Joshua Tree and spend a week there, and you surround yourself with a good piece of music, or you would take a hike, or you would read a book that inspires you, or something that triggers the initial process of you opening up to inspiration. And then it comes from wherever it comes, because no one still fully knows. And then there's the third kind, which is we'll call it the professional kind, where it's like inspiration on demand. I need to be inspired right now. I don't have the luxury to be inspired tomorrow, because tomorrow I need to have this project delivered. And So that involves, 100% participation of you, and it involves certain skill, and you need to, for the lack of a better way to put it, get into the zone as quickly as you can. And there are ways to do it. I don't know, like we can talk about it later, but this is the main thing. And once it hits you, your job in every one of the three cases is to stay out of the way until you know what it is that you have. Then you can judge it, you can manipulate it, you can erase all of it, parts of it, add to it, but that's later.
This is all excellent. This is amazing. This is great. That was a great segue, Assaf, because I think a lot of times we find ourselves, what I often say is part of the process trapping the inspiration, right? Hummie, you touched on it earlier as well. Like we have to find ways or places to craft and to structure. So form is important. But I've also realized in this grand scheme of things, the career and then, doing the art, music, and composition is largely, in any art that we do is largely, we bring our experience to the table, right? So we have to experience new things all the time. And so, Kristen, you talked also about tools and having techniques, and refining the process. And I love, this thought about, creating and having something on demand. What then do you do, right? What is this process? How do you go from, all right, something's not happening, but I need to make something happen? Can we talk a little bit about how you trap or maybe sort of create this inspiration, be it a director says, hey, I need this scene to be happy, sad, and chill all at the same time. And told from the perspective of the bird hanging out on the wire over here. And, we get interesting, directions and descriptive words. So how do we use those and translate that into something that is tangible and that works? Anybody?
Well, first of all, I think, we wish you good luck at that moment. That's a fair thing. But I think that, again, it's how this is the moment where you need to find a way to outlet it. Because as long as it's just in your head, you're gonna lose it for sure. It's not even a question. Unless it's something that's repeated in your head for a while. In that case, you can remember it for years and not write a single note on a piece of paper or anything. I would say that I can tell you what my process is, but I think that what Kristen mentioned about variety of things that she's doing, I think is very important to have more than one thing going on in your life in general, but artistically speaking, it's preferably you have a hobby outside of music or something like that. But if you don't, it's okay. You work on million types of different variety of projects in music, and that's okay too. As long as you give your brain a break between things, or switch tasking, and then you're open to it. And then if you need to generate it on demand, then what I do is, it's really hard to start any piece of art with a blank page. And when you need to generate it right now, it's nearly impossible. I think everybody would, to some degree, agree with me on that. So the first thing you need to do is to, as quickly as you possibly can, get something either on your sequencer or on page or anywhere in your brain. Once you have that, you can step away from it and have perspective and judge it. And that's where the creative process takes over, and your experiences and your skill and all of that. So what I would do, I would, Hummie mentioned it, it's like the opposite of subtractive. It's you keep adding things to it. I would almost work in a loop on my sequencer or on the piano, on a section, on an 8-bar, 16-bar, or whatever, and I'll keep going and going and going and going and going until I have something. And then I'll layer and layer and layer, and I'll try to spit out all the possible ideas that I have. And then I take Todd's approach of erasing everything one by one, muting tracks and taking out elements and everything. But that's the producer hat. That's no longer the initial inspiration or the initial creative process. At that point, it's already captured. Now we can produce it.
My father, who was a very wise man, once shared with me a thought which became more true as the older I got, which is that great art is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, where really what you do is you come up with a little germ of an idea, and how you actually take that germ and turn it into a whole piece is a combination of what Assaf was saying, experience and stuff, but I think that it has more to do with craft. I mean, we talk about teaching the craft of composition to people. What are the possible chords that this could harmonize with? What are the different directions I could take this? How are the different ways that I could manipulate this little germ of an idea? I mean, I always find that Beethoven wrote one of the greatest masterpieces in the world with 3 repeated notes and a leap down, da 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 da, and everybody knows it. And very few people would actually ever think of writing a piece with such a small little simple motif. And yet we can see that it's his brilliance and his craft that made that thing work so amazingly well. It's not a complex melodic idea. It's rather simple. It only has 2 notes, but the fact that he repeats them 3 times and then drops down, became the core germ of the inspiration for a long piece of music that he basically used all of his craft to make happen. And not only that, he was, I think at the time he wrote it, he was also deaf. So, talk about problems to have as a musician. But I think that, one of the things that I try to do most of the time is to improve my craft, knowing that the inspiration, I mean, is that a great inspired thing? No, it's how he used it that's what's so inspiring, And the idea that he could stand back and see all the different permutations and variations that make that thing work is pretty much the brilliant part of it, And so I don't know that I depend as much on inspiration as I do on craft, only because, there was a great quote that somebody once said that, few of us are geniuses, but there's no excuse for not having excellent craft skills. And I think that that's true. I mean, it's very possible that someone could sit down at a piano who knows nothing about music and eventually come up with a pretty darn cool piece, but that would probably take them a lot longer than most people who've had some experience, background in craft and training. And I think that that's one of the advantages of training, is that it kind of hones in, where you're going to go, what choices you're going to have. And of course, one of the things, like, I guess we're going to talk about this in a bit, but the idea of, like, how do you inspire yourself when you don't, there's limited time. And I think I always like to think about the Bach chorales. I don't know how many of you studied harmony using the Bach chorales, but one of the things that was interesting is I studied Bach, the chorales, with a guy who is like a Bach wizard, for lack of a better term, and he said that we all learned the Bach chorales the wrong way because we look at them as harmony. And Bach never wrote harmony; he wrote melody and he wrote counterpoint. And so he would do things like in his Bach chorales, he'd hide cannons between 2 of the voices, or he'd do a palindrome between 2 voices. So he was almost like he was making up these little puzzles for himself so that he wouldn't get bored of the fact that he had to write yet another Bach chorale, So it's kind of like, what are the tricks that we all do when we're writing the same or a similar type of piece that we've done before? How do we go about not doing the same thing again and again, which is, I think, an interesting point we might want to get into.
me, the common denominator that I'm hearing among all of us is actually listening. I mean, there's craft, and we all have our own craft that we've all developed, but I think we all, what Kristen, what you've all said is you listen to it before sleep, or you wake up the next morning and listen to it, uh, and it's always following the sound. It's the sounds that we've created, and then how do we move forward? I'm thinking we listen and go, what's next?
Or the alternate to that is you listen and go, not as good as I think I can make it. If you have time to revisit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the answer to the writing a cue by tomorrow morning, where's the inspiration come from? It's called the deadline.
Yeah, but it's an interesting thing, Todd. I find that when I'm under those deadlines, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the term, and maybe you use the term as well, when the creative juices are flowing, that you can write much faster and on some level much better when you're under pressure, because it kind of pushes that whatever button it is in your psyche that makes you be creative and makes you be clever.
Well, and like Jim and Assaf said, if you're working at that speed, you have to get out of your own way.
Right.
You can't afford to have monkey mind or overthink things.
Right. But I want to point out that I don't think that that's to the detriment of the music.
No.
I mean, think about all the amazing music John Williams wrote, and he doesn't do as much concert music as he does film music, and I don't think that anybody would question that his music is pretty masterful. But yeah,
No,
sometimes people think that because you're under deadline, you don't write as good music, and I think that I think you actually rise to the occasion.
That's what I was saying, is in a way you get out of your own way and the music can happen. I wasn't
Right, sure.
suggesting it was.
Absolutely agree.
Absolutely, and there's one more point that you mentioned, like the creative juices. I call it creative adrenaline, and that's like where the old joke of like, I think I'm not going to make it to the deadline, so I take another project just to push the envelope.
Yep.
Now you have to. So there you go.
That's funny.
You're a brave man.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, if two walk in the door, then go for it. For me, I think of things as a puzzle, and I think, if I am running and gunning and needing to create something really fast on a deadline, that a lot of my creative process will be pragmatic thinking about what needs to happen for a scene. And having answered the questions that need to be asked, I find that I am within the parameters that I know that I need to create. And once I have those questions answered, it kind of, the musical answer is right there. And then, the notes flow and you go. And, as Todd was saying, you're not second guessing, you're going, and, you just put it in gear and you use the tools that you have, which is your craft. Definitely. Yeah. I would have to say too, I think I heard Bruce Broughton one time say, just go with your first dumb idea,
Pretty accurate.
Yeah.
It's something on the page.
Get something on the page, and then it is up to your craft and how you, the skills that you have that you bring to it, that will determine how it turns out, and the time allotted. So yeah,
I
you
think
can
that
write
goes back,
fast.
yeah, I think that goes back to what I was saying about Beethoven's Fifth. Is like da is not the most inspired little germ, but it's what he did with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what Bruce was referencing.
I'm sure. I know Bruce well.
And I think, Kristen, you brought another great point, and that's like kind of you have all the answers. So basically, mentally, you're in a calm, not like calm because there is a deadline, but you're in a calm place of like knowing where you're headed. And I think it's John Powell that said he gets paid $50 to write the score and $1 million to stay calm. something like that. So
well, I'll sign up for that.
You have to be calm.
Yeah,
to some degree.
Yeah, you have to be focused. There's this place where you do kind of, you get into this place of flow, and you are making the decisions that you're making, not maybe consciously, but in that place, you know what needs to happen next, and then this will happen next. And you can predispose yourself to be in that flow, definitely.
Yeah, can I add one thing to this? And that I'll do this as a specific example to what you were talking about, which is what I would call functional melody, where a melody has to tell a specific story. Well, at the very beginning of a project, like if it's something like traditional, let me just say that, like a film or a TV show where there's a narrative that I have to support, I think of it like Moneyball in a sense. I'm like, I need to put a team together. Like, what do I need? Where am I going? It's like, use John Williams' E.T. as an example. Like at the very end, E.T. goes home. Okay, I need a theme for that. What's the first theme that you hear in the movie? That theme on piccolo solo. It's like, okay, so this is where we're going to start, and I'm going to get you there. So from a storyteller point of view, that's the first thing that I want to look at. Like, what do I need to get everyone there? Because what's hard about this is like it's taking a school bus load of children to a place. I need to get everybody there at the same time. So the only way you're going to do that is if you have a plan. And those are the composers, that's the techniques that I enjoy. And I think we all know, like when you watch a film and it's like someone didn't necessarily go in with a plan, and the storytelling will suffer for that. But because it's a collaboration art, the storytelling is where I think in most, these situations you have to start like, okay, what do I need to support this story? And that's when I start putting together like, okay, I need a first baseman. I'm gonna need a hero theme. I need a love theme. But what kind of love theme is it? Is it fulfilled love? Is it unfulfilled love? Those are very two different themes. And that's, the craft of writing those things is completely different. Knowing what, what I can't stand, honestly, is like when you hear sometimes people who are really good performers, you can hear that they're a great performer because that's what the score sounds like. Instead of going like, well, what does the story need? What is the idea that I have to bring to the table to support this? And it's not just, oh, someone's a great piano player and you're doing this noodling kind of thing. What does the story need? And what do I need to create as a composer to support this? And that makes at least the inspiration part, going back to the first question, a little easier in these cases where I know there are certain things that I need to create. And so then I can start, instead of going like, what does this thing need to be? Oh, wait, I played this thing in high school. Isn't that? And you're like, okay, you're lost. And you're not helping the movie. You're not helping yourself. So to know that, okay, I need a hero tune. It's like, what kind of hero is this? Is he a villain at the beginning, becomes a hero at the end? Well, how do I have to set up this theme? Is the theme that I've written capable of being set up as the villain becomes hero in the storytelling? And I think that's where the craft part comes in. As well, you're looking for inspiration, but you have to I think you're balancing the inspiration with craft. But anyway, story first, that's where I would begin.
Jim, I think that what you mentioned is almost, the next level, not the next level, the next step after what Hummie mentioned. So like the first step to get to a full theme, is the additive part, where you add elements, you get your theme together, you have something that kind of leads, it tells the story. And then once you have that, you know where you're headed, at this moment in the project, at this moment in the film, again, E.T. goes home. That's where like all the elements, all the different parts are coming together. But until that point, he used a lot of subtractive, elements, basically took away from the theme just to get us to the full picture at the end. So I guess it's kind of like sculpting and other crafts.
Yes, I would say that again, it's a bit, I think what essentially, I will just describe what I do for a living. And I would say it's more applied art than art in itself. Specifically the film scoring, TV scoring job, video games, this kind of thing. where it's like, I need to be able to, the way I describe it to people is I need to be able to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling and a bathroom. And my job usually lies somewhere in the middle where I need to be, I have the technique to do both. And my job is somewhere in the middle because it's applied art and, you know, the craft and what we're talking about is just know, I think that the most important thing that I've come to realize, you know, as I've matured as a composer at, you know, my mid 40s, just know, like knowing the material you have, what it can do, and can you tell the story that you need to tell with what you've created. And when I look at something like, I'll give you an example of specifically in ET, when you say like, you need a theme that does a specific, that tells a very specific story. And the theme that's in ET, the da 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 da, that theme. And I was like, I always love this theme. It's so beautiful. And I was like, how would you come up with something like this? And so I did the analyzation of it, and it's literally 4 triads, major, just chromatically going down. That's the tune. It's D major, D flat, C, B major. I'm like, okay, I could have done that, but I didn't. And then, okay, let's take the first one, put it at the end. So now it's a harmonic loop. Okay, this theme is to tell you in the story that things might not work out. And the way that he does this is in a very simple way of having the harmony descend. And at the same time, he's telling you that time is running out. How does he do that? All of the meter of the melody is even in quarters. Okay, it's clock-like. This is not solving the theory of relativity. This is applied. I need a theme that does this. And if I do these things, the harmony goes this way, the melody is going to be this. I'm already on my way to creating something that's going to help tell the story. And that's a big part of the way that I look at my work.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jim. I think that that's the way I look at my work also. I mean, but sometimes it's, you know, I did one thing where I had to write a piece of music that would work on solo violin, would work as a romantic piece, and then as an early 20th century ballet piece. And, you know, so it already had all these parameters that I had to meet. And that almost makes it easier because now there's less choices to make.
Absolutely. I think I agree with both of you a lot. It's definitely how it's done. Yeah.
This is absolutely incredible. I feel like we have to have a part 2. There's so much information packed into this. This is great. Like, I hear so much amazing things that I would like to revisit. Mainly, one of the big reasons why I want to talk about inspiration, because Hummie, you brought it up. It was 1% about the inspiration, and you know, the rest of it about perspiration, putting in the work and having the craft and the tools and the technique. I know a lot of times when I'm practicing composition, that's exactly what I'm practicing is, you know, the craft and trying to, you know, develop new ways of, you know, getting to the end result in such a way that is, if I am perspiring, it's hopefully in a good way and I'm not about to literally pass out. But also listening, I think, is absolutely important. And, you know, listening to the music, listening to oneself, and then getting out of the way and being a witness. You know, Todd, you brought up the part about listening. Let's see, there's so much stuff here, but I want to, before I continue with that, I want to ask this from Tracy, who's hanging out with us. Thoughts on intuition versus inspiration during the process. Right? Because you can have that spark and it could be really groovy, you know, but does it feel right? I remember one of the things that we would discuss in class, especially when we're talking about reading a scene and understanding a scene. It's like when you go write something, right? Great, you're writing something. But as you mentioned, Jim, does it serve the story? Is it doing what that is? So how then do you take that idea that you have and determine whether or not it's right? I don't know if that's quite the question, but intuition versus inspiration. Thoughts?
As John Cage said, that's such a good question. I'd hate to ruin it with an answer.
I love it. I love it. I was waiting. Oh,
But,
yes. Right.
but yeah, I mean, I think I'm guessing that we all, besides honing our craft, which is exactly where, the better our craft, the better we can face any challenges that come up or deadlines that come up. But ultimately, we're making some decisions by intuition. I mean, I think the decisions are often made by craft, and the better you're at your craft, the more like intuitive you can become. The more you can let go into it. It starts to become transparent, and I think we work on intuition at that point. So intuition is process oriented, I guess.
I would say that there's the part of the process. Again, there's the initial inspiration, and then you need to strip away everything from it and go like, does it actually fit? Because 2 minutes ago, I thought I'm a genius because I came up with this thing, but it actually doesn't work at all. And but like the initial spark, you need to connect to it emotionally, and then you apply all the craft, and then you put that, especially with film music, you put that against picture, and then you just know it works or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you can go about it analytically, of course, and dissect it and everything, but you first know that it doesn't work. Then you try to figure out why it doesn't work, and then you come up with a solution. And the other way around, sometimes you can put any piece of music against a picture, and all of a sudden it matches perfectly, and everything is in perfect harmony, and you go like, what, how? And it just happens like that. But like intuitively, I think, Todd, you definitely mentioned that your craft and skill, and it's basically your life experience taught you to trust your intuition, but it has also a separate layer to it that is subconscious, that you just know when something works or not. And then, of course, the intuition of the director can be very different than yours, and that's okay too. But then you have a discussion and you figure it out.
So for the last 10 years, I've devoted a lot of my life to teaching film composition. And one of the things that I had to try to figure out was how to teach my students to scribble down their initial idea, which we all probably do, but then how to stand back and look at that idea and to realize what can be done with the idea in terms of like even coming up with a short motif, and then how to develop it, how to make it better, how to maybe change it a little bit so that it's a stronger, more unique motif. And I think that that's one of the most important skill sets that that I've been able to help students realize is like, you come up with one little idea, don't throw it away because it's a junky idea. Let's see what it is that actually is great. And again, I go back to Beethoven. Was not very much of an idea, but it's what he saw that he could do with it. And what's very interesting when I'm working with students is that they'll come up with an idea and they don't see what the possibilities are. And they have to be taught how to look at their music and stand back and edit it and figure out, what can I do with this little idea? I mean, it's like you were saying, like Bruce Broughton said, work with the first idea you come up with, because it's really being able to stand back and figure out how to take that idea and make it into something much greater than the idea it is itself.
Yeah, I think the question is, how can it work versus like it doesn't work. It's
Right.
Like as soon as you judge it in terms of like it's not going to work, then okay, you need to come up with a new idea. Once you go like, how can it work? You open yourself to other possibilities of like, okay, this might work. I don't know how yet. Let me resolve the puzzle. I think the other layer of intuition versus inspiration versus the creative process is taste. It's kind of like, what is your personal taste? What is your personal preferences when it gets to it? What feels right to you? It's like kind of intuition and taste are interconnected on that level, I think, a bit.
Yeah, but it's interesting because one of the things that I've had happen to stuff is that I'll be working with a student and they get frustrated because they can't see the possibilities. And so they'll work on something for a week and then throw it away and start all over again. And I'm going, no. Let's go back and keep working with what you've got here. That's the frustrating part. It's developing that muscle, that craft, that where you can actually start seeing all the possibilities.
Well, you have to develop that muscle because, you know, it's like first week at the gym, you know, it sucks. but then, you know, later on it works better. You feel better.
The accumulation of all the goodness. Yeah. These are interesting words. And I guess I would be hard pressed to say I have written something by intuition, but if a director that I'm working with wants to label my work as highly intuitive, then I'm fine with that. I guess because I know what it is that I'm doing on my end, and the application of that label to me matters less than actually creating the music that I know will be workable. I think for me, it could be inspiration or it could be intuition, you know, like what strikes at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, what do we call that? Maybe that is intuition. Maybe it's inspiration. It's really it's a really interesting question to try to separate out those words. What happens when you are in the shower and you're not thinking about all of the daily tasks? Your brain is like more open, and you know, this thing comes and it's just like, oh man, that's like gold. I've got to write that down, you know, that sort of thing. And this to me is a completely separate thing from like working for a specific scene and solving for a specific scene, or you know, understanding the arc of an entire story and where you are in this story and what needs to happen. A portion of the early thinking falls into, I think, inspiration. And for me, when I am thinking about the questions that will help me solve for a project, I do suppose that some of my answers come by intuition and by you know, my accumulated experience and knowledge. And you know, say, you know, your brand new students, Hummie, don't know what it is they have, but 10 years down the road, if they're still doing that, if they're exercising that muscle, in 10 years they're going to understand a lot better what the material is that they have and what it's bringing to the table. So intuition or inspiration, either one of those, I think for me seems like a separate kind of enterprise from that.
Well, it's an interesting question because I think the thing is that intuition and inspiration eventually become experience, which is basically the basis of a craft. I mean, I think one's an early form of another, maybe. You know what I'm saying? At the beginning, you might do it by inspiration, but then you want to kind of repeat that, and that eventually goes, oh, okay, I see what I did there. And then you learn that, and that then becomes part of your craft that you carry around in your back pocket. So maybe inspiration is the early part of it, and craft is the later part of it. An interesting thought.
Wow. That's a great thought. Fantastic. So
that was amazing.
So Andrew, looks like we have some comments from the chat. Do you mind chiming in with those? We had one from Eva who said, inspiration is wanting to go somewhere and intuition is how you get there, which I think is quite nice. Thank you. Eva, are you still there? You want to chime in about that?
I'm here.
Hi.
No, it's just great to listen to everybody. You know, I'm not a composer, but I've worked with lots and lots of composers, been so lucky to over the years, and, you know, more of a filmmaker. So I know I just feel like inspiration is when you get this fire in you and you think you have to do something, you know, whether it's somebody asking you to do it, you know, whatever the motivation is. And, you know, maybe you're hired by a director, maybe you're hired by a filmmaker, but you have something that you need to do. And how do you get there? You need to use your intuition as a guide, and along with your craft, bring everything you can to the table. So that was just my take on it.
Word. Thank you. That was beautiful. Right on. It's great to see you.
And then we have a question from our friend Darian. Is composing sometimes like the quote from Debussy, works of art make rules, rules do not make works of art? And also, is inspiration like dumb luck, and intuition is more the experience of all previous dumb luck happenings?
That was good. Right on. Anybody want to take that one?
Can you read the first question first? I want to attack that one first, but the second one's a little stranger for me.
Is composing sometimes like the quote from Debussy, works of art make rules, rules do not make works of art?
That's a really interesting question. I think that, certainly we all stand on the shoulders of brilliant geniuses who came before us, and certainly, but even with that, it's kind of interesting that, that I mean, it's hard to imagine that music all started in one place and then spread out everywhere, versus people from all the different cultures kind of coming up with similar ideas. I mean, it's kind of like, even though Indian music, it's called microtonal, the fact is it's still based on a major scale, and all the microtonal stuff is mostly the little ornamentation. But Sare Gama Pa De Ni is the same thing as Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti, is the same thing as C D E F G A B. And with possibly the only exception being that I'm fully familiar with is gamelan, which uses a completely different scale, which to a lot of American ears just sounds really weird. But I forget what I guess it must have been E.T. where they had all these different cultures doing the da 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 da, and there was the Kodai hand symbols that was done at one point.
Yeah, that's I think Close Encounters.
Yeah, the Close Encounters. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that mama, that little thing of a minor third descending, that's international. That has nothing to do with what culture you're a part of. That's kind of like built into human DNA. So I think that a certain amount of musical, what goes on in music is kind of built on the DNA of the the scale, and how the scale gets broken up, and the 12 tones, which is most musics around the world take advantage of that. And so I think it's an interesting thing, because I do think that when whoever it is the early people, whether it was you think Gregorian chant or something, they started building on something, and then we went to polyphony, and we went to all kinds of chromaticisms and things of that sort. I think that was a natural progression of something that was on some level bound to happen because of our music system. So I don't want to put down strictly inspiration, but I'm curious if there was anybody that's ever done a study comparing Western music development and Eastern music development, and did they kind of follow similar paths, because we all kind of came to the same results. I mean, when you first start writing songs, I'm sure everybody in this room did the same thing. Everything you wrote was 1-4-5-1, and then you all of a sudden discovered minor chords, and you thought you were a brilliant genius, and so it's kind of like we all go through this same thing on some level, and then at some point you start studying music, and you kind of leapfrog over having to experience it firsthand for the first time because somebody else did it, and you can go, oh, that's pretty cool, secondary dominance or whatever, But it's an interesting thing. But I do think that the early masters, whether somebody else would have done it or not is hard to say, but they definitely developed. So I think that it was a combination of there being some understanding about music, and then wanting to push that the creative field forward, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I would love to speak to that as well. I think, when you do study classical music, you see an application of the rules that, we're looking at in retrospect. And the study of classical music is basically the study of what the rules have been, and how each of the different composers broke them in their own very particular way that made them sound like who they were, and made them, you know, the creators of the masterworks. So it's an interesting question, you know, what comes first, the rule or the not rule? And I think, you know, as far as, you know, studying classical music, you're learning first the rule, and then you're looking at how everybody's breaking the rule. And hopefully somewhere in that you are also figuring out who you are as a human being and what that means for you, how you will be breaking those rules in your own particular way that makes it sound like you. And I'm not suggesting that that might be on every single film that you might be doing, because, you know, you may have only a very short period of time and you're applying craft, and that means you know, I'm going to, like, you know, kind of download based on what the rules say will work at this particular place. You know, I mean, I have inspiration in certain parts of scores, and I have, you know, craft and hurry up in other sections of the same score, you know. I think the rules and the not rules are holding hands to create, hopefully, something that is, you know, more and better.
I think when you go back to Bach, you know, when we are all taught Bach in a certain way, and then we look at what he actually wrote, and every time he broke the wall is when music happened. Basically, like everything else is, you know, pure math in a beautiful way, of course, but when he broke those rules in his way, no one else could break it in his way, in his voice. It's when music really happens, and that's when you're really engaged. And then one of his sons, I think it's Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, wrote in his either composition or harmony book that fugues, which is, you know, what his dad, you know, did so well, is ancient history, and it's antiquated, and no one should have ever considered doing that. So you build one on top of the other to make music and art, you know, all forms of art evolve, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, though, because being an educator, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of times we're still studying stuff that really only applied to music that was written in the 18th century. You know? Because
it's a great form, and like it is. You can dissect it in a very easy way. Again, you have form, you have structure, that makes it a lot easier to understand certain concepts.
It is, except that, you know, I get students who have, like, you know, no parallel fifths tattooed to the back of their eyelids.
No.
And, you know,
and then you go to DBC and it's all parallel fifths.
Yeah. So I just think it's weird that hasn't progressed further. I mean, I always make the analogy that if they taught medicine the way we teach music theory, they would teach frontal lobotomies and leeches, but we don't do that anymore because we have new technology.
It's brilliant.
Well, I think you would call that the common practice period, right?
I guess.
Just a quick sidebar, because Eva's here and Kennedy was just there at Lou Harrison's house. And Hummie, you mentioned if anyone's, like, you know, studied intersection between East and West, and I would suggest Lou Harrison did that very much with his American Gamelan. And there's another way to start to dip into music is his music primer, which I still refer to all the time. It's just a beautiful book, and approaches music differently than, you know, what the classically way that we were all, I'm guessing, from what we're talking about, we were all classically trained. So,
well, Lou's, you know, one of his most famous quotes is "Cherish, conserve, consider, create," and it really has to do with, you know, studying other forms, ancient traditions, appreciate it, learn from it, and create new beauties.
Right. Stand on the shoulders, but don't repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I interject real quick? Just I was gonna bring up Lou Harrison, but I was trying to wait. And so Todd, I'm so glad you did. So, Hummie, when you were talking about the the every human has it in their DNA. I talk a lot about the pentatonic scale, and one of the places I learned it was from Lou Harrison. And the one that we use, if you're in C, E flat, F, G, and A, you can find that scale across every culture in the land, some derivation of it in the traditional music and both in the newer music. So I think that's pretty fantastic that's brought up, and we circled back right around to Lou Harrison, one of the people that inspired me to start this whole crazy Mad Composer Lab realness. And that inspiration came from my composition teacher at Cal State Fullerton, who introduced me to Lou Harrison through his primer that I read once, and then I read it again right after I stopped really pursuing full time the film music thing. I read it again, and it put so many things in perspective. It just helped, And so that was a lot of the inspiration for starting this roundtable to discuss and talk about all the ways that we create music or whatever we do. Where does it come from? Is it inspiration? Is it work? Is it intuition? What is the process? It's all a process, and we all have a different way of tackling that. And so anyway, I'm getting sidetracked, so we should get back to it. But thank you, Eva. Thank you, Todd. There was one more thing I wanted to ask. I don't want to derail this because it's amazing conversation, but a lot of us are trying to do what we can to spread the word. We talk about it being craft, and there's so many times that we run across people that don't necessarily have the technique or the craft. I think, Hummie, you mentioned it earlier where you're working with a student and they have something and they're not sure exactly what to do with it.
Right.
I remember being there, and I remember being in that spot in such a way that my composition teacher would scream at me, is like, what are you doing? You don't need all this extra stuff. You have this much material. And so it kind of forced me into a way of thinking of like in four basic elements, because you can add all the things. We can ornament, we can be very Baroque in how much we adorn our music and get really elaborate with it. But I found if I start with just a few basics, the sound, what sound is it? And how is it being perceived? Is it being perceived in the ear, or is it a silent situation, right? Where it's more vibrational. Then we have the timbre, the color of that sound, the tone quality. And then how does that sound travel through time? So we've got the rhythm. And then, the form. So I start with those things and then let everything sort of chemically combust from there if it's not already doing something. So how does one develop process and technique and not just relying on inspiration? My first composition teacher once asked me in a lesson, what are you going to do when you're up against it and you don't have any inspiration? What is your process? How are you going to get past that? And me being 18 or 19, like, yeah, whatever, I'm not going to ever have writer's block, I'm not going to have that issue, I got this, man. And he was like, do you really? So what he did was turn me on to a few basic, processes. We talked about Beethoven. Bum, 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 bum. 1, 2, 3, something else. Take that same thing, bum, 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 sequence it down. And then he took it and just as a true craftsman, took that basic elements and wove it out into this masterpiece. So what are some ways, if there's someone who's listening and stuck, right, and they're just on inspiration, and inspiration led them to the wall, dropped them off, and said, good luck. How can we help them out of this? What are some ways? Are there ways?
Jan LaRue, who wrote a book on style analysis back in the day at NYU, I think, he talks about 4 different sort of compositional strategies that I always, if I'm stuck, I think it's recurrence, development, um, contrast. I mean, it's all right there in Beethoven. What you were just saying, you know, a recurrence, and then development, and then contrast after bum, bum, contrast, and then the second theme is on the beat instead of off the beat, and it's quarter notes and half notes, so high contrast. So, oh, and yeah, so, and the other thing is like basically antiphonal. So, you know, it's really simple analysis rubric of four things that, you know, I'll sit and look, okay, well, let's think about that. Or as William Stafford, the poet laureate of Oregon, said, I just lower my standards. Start trimming things.
Great. I think as a practice, you know, again, when you just get into this and you try to train your muscles to actually do this thing, and you're not as flexible yet, you can take one bar from your favorite composer, just the first bar, and that's the only given thing, and write a piece from that. And then when you're done, erase the first bar, replace it with something yours, and, you know, do that 100 times. And then by the end of this process, you would probably have the ability yourself to create the first bar. Maybe.
I like that. That's great. I'll give you a couple of my tricks for this. Is I found that when this specific problem is when the front of my brain is getting in the way of me doing my job. So I essentially just mess with it. So I would take something. This is again specifically my job, just like working to picture, and I'm like, I'll take something that does not work, that will not work, and put it up against it to just wear down the editor in my brain. Just put some weird stuff up against it, and then your mind starts relaxing a little bit because you punched it, you know, in its head, which is always a great thing. And then sometimes you put something in and it's like, okay, you know what I liked about this was this, or what I don't like about it is this. This is actually, it was a great quote from Lin-Manuel Miranda. He said, sometimes more importantly than listening to stuff that you like, listen to stuff that you don't like and figure out why you don't like it. So if I'm stuck on something, I'll just take some really random music and just start throwing things up against it to just break down this editor in the front of my brain, which is now getting in the way. But I remember when I was first starting out, I used to give myself little exercises during downtime, specifically when I was trying to learn an extensive sample library where I was working at the time, that I would take 16 instruments that I had not used before and then try to write a piece of music with them. And I would just pick, you know, the wackiest things, you know, bagpipes and clav, just whatever it was going to be, and just try to see like how creative could you be in this space. And again, this is just messing with the editor. This, instead of going, I have to do something very specific, let your mind wander. And it's like, and okay, what are the techniques that come with something like this? And one more thing I wanted to say about that is that I think when I talk to young composers, I always want to like, well, what do you want to do as a composer? You know, and I always give the example of as being a chef. Like, if you want to cook for your family and for yourself and be as creative as you want, like there are techniques just to do that well. If you want to work in a restaurant and you've got to do 300 dinners a night, that's a different set of abilities that you have to achieve to work with other people, timing, deadlines, techniques that are changing. We don't have this ingredient tonight. Now you have to do a whole nother preparation. When you want to work at that level, it's a different level of technique. And if you are at home just like singer songwriter and you're putting out your, like, then this doesn't necessarily apply to you. If you want to like do 1 hour network TV and you got to do one of those every week, that's a different skill set, which requires different training. But anyway, that's how I disturb the editor in my brain.
No, I
And
can't
if I
agree
could,
more.
yeah, I want to jump in and second that, Jim. I have a poet friend who says writer's block is rarely a dearth of ideas, but more often an overabundance of judgment. And I think, when you are a creative, you have got to learn to grapple with, what you're calling the editor in your brain, that thing that's saying no, 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 no. And, we must teach ourselves to yes and our ideas to be able to get past that first obstacle. And start actually in with the formative creative process.
Well said, Kristen. That's the rules of improv that you're stating, right?
Yes, and yes.
Yes, and yes, and.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, and I think it was Wayne Shorter that said, composition is just improvisation slowed down, done slower. And improvisation is composition done really fast and in the moment.
That's really great. That's excellent.
I think it's really accurate. Yeah. But it's also like when you improvise, you never commit to like you improvise and improvise and improvise. It's hard for a lot of people to commit to a final idea, because every time they'll play a certain piece, it will be different. And when you slow it down and commit to it, this is where you have a final piece. But again, it's not in real time anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It does. It crosses the line from improvised to actually composed then.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. This is wonderful. I think we got a couple of questions on YouTube. Andrew, are you able to see those questions?
Our friend over here, Lisa Goes Eco-Friendly, asked, what is it that starts or initiates the process and of inspiration, and is it too intangible?
That's a good one. Maybe you should read that.
And then she also asked, what other activities or interests do we all participate in that that help fuel the inspiration?
Well, this may seem strange, but I try to I think that I try not to be, I try to kind of get away from it. I gotta get away in order to come back and have a better perspective. That, taking breaks, even if I'm in the middle of something, just taking an hour off, walking away from things, and then coming back, and it's almost like having a new set of eyes. It's kind of like being in the studio, and if you spend too many hours mixing, your ears just kind of become numb to it, and you don't get a good mix. But I find that the same thing has to do with making compositional decisions. That I come up with something, I'll work on it for a couple of hours, and then I got to get away, because I might be overthinking it, or I might be making bad decisions just because I need to have some space between me and the music.
I think this is true to almost all our senses, that we start filtering things in our brain. It's definitely our ears, our sense of smell. Same thing. After a while, you stop smelling things. You go out, you come back, you go like, ugh, what happened here? But it's the same thing. It's you gain perspective immediately with fresh, fresh set of eyes, like Hummie said.
I agree, and I think it's critical to know yourself and to know when when you're teetering on the brink of, well, I'll just say, we call it peeing in the mustard.
What?
Right? Gone too far. Whoops, I've just ruined the whole thing. So sorry to be crass, but sometimes we can do that. And it's really really knowing yourself as a creative and knowing when you need to step back and when you need to do, go and get some context so that doesn't happen. I know when I get too tired, I'm going to ruin something. And if I'm not in the right frame of mind, I can also ruin something. So yeah, I'll leave it with that. What a great image.
Can I get a t-shirt with that? I want a t-shirt that says that.
Yeah. Don't pee in the mustard.
Great. Pee in the mustard.
And I think it's also like back to what James said in the beginning of, basically you need to sleep on it to deactivate all the judgment and everything. And then, in the morning, in many, many cases, your brain kind of resolved some of the issues. And if it didn't, at least you come and listen to it with a fresh perspective and you go like, what was I thinking?
I think recently I had this writer's block, right? And I just could not write. I don't know what it was. I could not come up with any ideas. I was messing around in synthesizer after synthesizer and just trying to come up with something, and I could not come up with anything for the life of me. And I wrote a song and I didn't like it, and I kept writing, and I kind of forced myself out of this creative block, and I came back to it just a couple of days ago, and I love it now. So I think really coming into that new perspective and taking time away really fuels that process, I think.
Excelente. This is just a fantastic discussion. We're almost to the 9:30 mark, but I just wanted to quickly talk about a quote that resonates with me, especially with regard to a lot of the things that we talked about, especially with composition in all the ways, be it for film, television, or just for concert stage. But good composition, according to Robert Henry's an American painter, is like a suspension bridge. Each line adds strength but takes none away. Does that apply to the art of composition as well?
Can you say the last part again? I missed it.
Oh yeah, so it's good composition is like a suspension bridge. Each line adds strength but takes none away.
Yeah, I think that's the elegant way of saying don't pee in the mustard.
Yeah, right? I was wondering because, a lot of times when
making it real.
I interpreted that somewhat differently, so maybe I didn't get the
okay, yeah.
But my interpretation of that is that you can keep adding stuff without hurting things, and I think that that's totally false. I mean, I think you can get too caught up in like sometimes just a single instrument playing a line is really what you need, and you shouldn't be adding like the entire orchestra playing along with it.
Okay, and yeah. That's what I was getting at, was like, okay, because if you're adding it, does it indeed, are you adding it because it's adding the strength? Because if it doesn't, then we have to exercise some sort of.
That's when you pull out your eraser.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Only what is necessary. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you're playing organ and you're combining stops, you're not making it louder. You're actually muddying the resolution that you have on the organ. So yeah, more is not always more. In Christmas tree decoration, it is, but anything else, you've got to really practice discernment.
Kristen, I just want to quote you from here on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, t-shirts for everyone.
Yeah, you've got some great ones. That's beautiful.
It's hilarious. Yeah, I think you have to be careful of how much you add. That you can. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, again, going back to teaching students, is that one of the problems that happens with young composers is they overwrite.
Yep.
So that you have to teach them, that there's the economy of writing that makes it elegant. And sometimes if you put too much stuff in, it may make it, muscular, but it doesn't necessarily make it into a better piece of music.
every time I hear that bit of advice, like just take some stuff out. It's like when you're going out and you take one accessory off, or
that's Coco Chanel.
Right? Exactly.
That's Coco Chanel.
Chanel, exactly.
Before you go out, take off two.
Take off two. Right on. And then in the Baroque period, everything got so ornate. They were like, you know what? No. Chambonnier and all the French composers. And also I think too about the Star Spangled Banner. If we didn't have that tune, we probably wouldn't really know how it went because it's so adorned so much. So it's always nice to come back and take a balance or whittle away. I always wonder what some of these groovy sculptures would look like if they didn't, take a chisel a little bit more away. So, all right.
Another way that I sometimes talk about it when I'm talking to my students is that if I ask you to bake a cake and you put in chocolate and cherries and caramel and marshmallows and everything sweet, you basically come up with a mush, as opposed to if you make a great chocolate cake and the chocolate can really sail through, that's probably a better, purer experience on some level.
I dig it. That's so great. I kind of want to end on that. That was like amazing.
I will end with but don't then pee on the cake.
Right. Don't.
That's exactly same idea.
Good one, Jim.
Same idea, a little less crass.
Yes. I love it. This is fantastic. Well, before we peace out, I wanted to see if there's anyone else who is hanging out with us tonight that has anything they want to ask or mention or just add to the conversation. I just want to say on behalf of myself and Andrew and the Mad Composer Lab, this has been incredible. I'm so thankful and so grateful for all of you taking time to come and hang out and talk about this, out in the open where we can, really discuss it and hear from each other, because everybody has a different way that they're going to, tackle the composition or the art. And so many times I hear, people just kind of hacking at it and they get disheartened, thinking that they're not doing the right thing. And I'm like, well, there are some right things, but you got to knock around and figure out what's going on. Also ask some questions, and then also figure out where there's some resources where you can ask people who are doing it and can offer some sound, reasonable advice. Now, whether they take it, that's a whole different story. But the least we could do is, spread the word and spread the information. And I think a lot of times, we always talk about, or hear the term, the gatekeepers of culture. Well, if we're going to keep the gate, we better make sure that, we're doing a good job at it. So I want to thank y'all for coming again. And so is there anyone else that wants to say anything or would like to chime in? Tracy, thank you so much. I'm just reading the notes here. Right on.
Yeah. I just want to thank you, Kennedy.
Oh, sorry, Todd, go ahead.
Oh, no. I just wanted to thank you, Kennedy. And it's great meeting you all. Thank you.
Indeed. Yes, Todd, thank you so much. Yeah, so hopefully we can do this. I'm hoping to do this every other month with a different topic. We can switch out panel. I'm hoping to add some visual artists, also some, spoken word artists, just from all different perspectives. A couple of conductors I spoke with, so they'll hopefully join us with the next one, and hopefully some dancers and some movement artists. So we'll keep doing it and just keep the conversation rolling and talk more about craft and how it applies to different disciplines. It's been incredible geeking out about writing for film as well, because it's one of those things that is near and dear to my heart. But and then also to see y'all's beautiful faces. So with that, I think we should call it a night. I have indeed recorded this, and I'll check the recording to see if everything turned out and panned out. And if that is the case, I will make it available to all of you to share it with your students if you'd like, on your social media, however you wish. And then I've got some donations coming in, so definitely make sure that I have your PayPal information so I can, express a little bit of gratitude.
So sweet.
It was a lot of fun and good to see everybody's
Indeed,
smiling faces too. Yeah.
Right?
Yes, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
I think
so
Eva
much.
has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, you have a question, Andrew?
I think Eva has a question,
Eva.
actually.
Yeah, Eva. What's up?
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
it's great because you know, I'm just here and great people. So
Right on. Absolutely. Great
Yeah.
to see you. All right. So, yeah, so we'll call it a night. Until next time, I will see y'all a little bit later on. So we'll reach out and with a follow-up email, and I hope to hear from y'all soon.